Well, the polls do look grim for the coalition ahead of voting day on Saturday. Something like 4 to 6 points behind Labor after preferences, depending what poll you're looking at. But does that really mean that all hope is lost? Now, I'm joined by Tom Connell, our Sky News cephalogist, the best in my view, and it's not just because he's a colleague, on any TV station in the country, including the ABC, and he will star, of course, in our election night coverage. I know Tom always blushes when I say that, but it's meant. I've said it personally as well. Tom, is there any hope for the coalition?
Try not to blush through the makeup, Andrew. It might be helping me. Look, I think there is some. We've discussed before, for example, polling. Everyone knows it was wrong in 2019. It was wrong in 22 as well on Labor's primary by 3 or 4 percentage points. The momentum against them is a huge problem, and I'll get to polling in a moment. But if you're sort of mapping out how will this be an unexpected good night for the coalition, and realistically in a minority sense, I think here's what would need to happen. First of all, they'd need overall gains in Teals and Greens. Now, obviously, the main game for them is winning seats off Labor because that closes the gap. But if we think of those Teal and Greens seats, they lost a whole swathe of them last time. On a very, very good night, perhaps they get 4 or 5 of them overall. Victoria as well, they need a swing there. They need the right swing, though. So think of the smaller margins, Chisholm and McEwen at 3-4%, and then they need their bigger swings out in places like Gordon. So what they need there is an efficient swing, Andrew, the right amount in the right areas. They don't need anywhere wasted swings. And if you do that, you can have the national mood not so much in your favour, but win seats. That would apply in New South Wales as well. Again, they're going to have some swings there. I don't feel like there's an overall mood in New South Wales of a big swing towards them, but it doesn't mean they can pick up a few seats such as and I'll go to them in a moment, Werriwa, Bennelong, Reid, even if the overall swing isn't big to them. So those Victorian and New South Wales, they need the right swings in the right areas. And then Queensland, this is where Labor's actually eyeing a few off. They can't afford losses. So once they're going backwards anyway, that's where they're in trouble. So some of the bigger margins they're targeting as well, these will be needing to either be in their corner or close if they're a chance. Because these are the outer suburbs Peter Dutton's been targeting that you alluded to there. Werriwa in Sydney, 5.3%. Dunkley in Melbourne, 6.8%. Hawke, 7.6%. That's also in Melbourne. And so is Gorton at 10%. So some big margins. I'm not saying they all have to go, but if we see the swing on in those types of seats, then you're saying, OK, the outer suburban strategy might just be working.
Well, gee, I'm looking at 10% swing. I wouldn't want to be betting my future on overcoming that, given the overall polls. But these days, elections are very tightly targeted in marginal seats. That makes them very hard to read. But looking at the polls overall since December, when and where have they fallen for the coalition? And what does that tell you about this election?
I think the biggest issue and what it tells us is that momentum. You alluded to that time frame there, that in recent years we haven't had such a savage swing from one side to the other. So if we look through it, News Poll now, I'll actually just go just before December and November. So Labor's at 52%, 48 two-party preferred. That's 3% towards it and 3% against the coalition, obviously. That's decent enough, but look at the primary change for the coalition since then. That's what's significant, because all this talk of preference flows, and that could matter, and that might be added in the hope column, if you like, Andrew, that One Nation preferences might swing a bit better or flow a bit better for the coalition. But when we look now at the coalition's primary, in November, 40% in News Poll, 35% now. That's a huge reduction and actually gets them below the last result in the election. So the concern here for me on that is the trend, and also that it's been everywhere in terms of the states. Some has come off every state, including in Victoria, where they were on track to make clear gains of 5-6 seats plus, and now it needs to be that efficient swing I spoke about. The other issue is the issues themselves, where voters are sort of deciding which party's better. So I'll go through some of them. Providing quality healthcare. Look, maybe you go, yeah, this is Labor's thing, Anthony Albanese and his Medicare card. But the coalition matched that huge spend that even the AMA said wasn't a good use of money. The RACGP said it wasn't a good use of money. The coalition matched it and it hasn't helped them. Look at the gap there and who thinks they'll get better healthcare from. Help with cost of living. Again, this is something where the coalition has got in arguably a bidding war with Labor. So it's spent a lot of money and not got much gain from it. It does have gain from defence. if you look at this huge gap, and yet if they're going to cash in on this, arguably, should they have released their defence policy earlier than when they did? They've got a clear lead there, so Australians trust them. But, you know, what about the detail? Lowering taxes for Australians. This is one that that will have them concerned. 7 percentage points lower than the Liberal Party. And again, wading deep into it to talk about the Lamito tax cut they were giving. And then this might be the big X factor that we might talk about a lot, dealing with Donald Trump and the uncertainty. This is harder for Peter Dutton, Andrew, to be fair, to sort of just assuage voters. But 39% compared to 32%. And that X factor in the campaign, I think, the sort of events, dear boy events, that's the one that's hurt the coalition.
I think that last slide is the wrong headline on it. It should be standing up to Donald Trump. And that's where I think Peter Dutton should have made a criticism, even if it seemed undiplomatic. Tom, any surprises you expect on election night or from this campaign?
Look, one thing to really look out for, it's happened in past elections, but is pre-poll and postal vote. It looks like they'll grow again. And there is a chance that this does really correct seats. The likelihood would be Labor could be in the lead on two-party preferred. But if that lead is 2 or 3% in a seat, that won't necessarily be safe. So we're going to have to be a little bit cautious on the night. Look, I try to get out there and be front leading. Nobody wants to see someone sitting on the fence, if you like, while you're on the touch screen. But there'll just be a little note of caution on that. So it'll be worth watching later on. Some of those contests could get bigger corrections than we've seen before at a federal level. The other one is just all the different moods in different states. Tasmania could actually be pickups for Labor. You know, last time around, Peter Gutwein and Scott Morrison were still popular. Queensland could be too. Victoria, that could still be savage for Labor. I mean, they hate the state government, so we'll see how much that's gone back. And then places like the Northern Territory, I mean, that could be 2 pickups for the coalition. Those seats swing hard. So we won't just get a uniform mood. I'm sure of that on the night. There'll be different states to look at, different areas in those states as well. So the Hunter, I think, is going to be a better area this time around than Western Sydney for the coalition. So the usual scripts, if you like, and narratives could be somewhat upturned on election night when we look at different areas of the country. And I think the suburban one has to be one to watch, right? So if this is the strategy to replace the inner city seats, is it working? Maybe it comes in the form of seat pickups, but maybe it's also bigger swings and a classic 2-election strategy. To get a 2-election strategy, you've got to win some seats.
I'll be looking out
crucial,
for Kooyong.
Yeah.
Mate, I've got my fingers crossed there because I simply don't like that Teal person there, that Kooyong will be one pickup. Not necessarily, as long as it's not a Teal. Tom Connell, you're going to be kept really busy on election night. Have a great call of the card, and I'll be crossing to you a couple of times during the night. Good luck. Thank you very much.